Design should make our world and our lives within it better. It should enhance quality of life as well as our understanding of it. There is a growing problem in our world that is in desperate need of good design. This problem is the one of habitat fragmentation, which is growing as we do. A primary example of this can be seen with roads and highways. They bisect and cut up precious habitat for wildlife, often disconnecting them from their migratory patterns, breeding areas, and access to fresh water and hunting grounds. This is causing wildlife to cross treacherous and deadly highways that often result in not only their death, but much financial cost and destruction due to the inevitable vehicular accidents. A pressing example of this can be seen in California's Bay Area, where one prominent road ecologist has referred to it as the Ring of Death. In particular, Highway 17 near Los Gatos in the Santa Cruz Mountains sees medium to large mammals of the rare and endangered type often jump out from the trees onto the highway. Though this number may not seem extremely alarming, losing just one puma has a huge impact on their genetic diversity. Though there may not be any wildlife overpasses in the Bay Area, or many in the US in general, there are an abundance throughout Europe and Canada, such as this one of the A50 in the Netherlands. This overpass utilizes open sources of fresh water to draw in and entice wildlife to utilize the corridor. Another overpass on the A50 is fairly wide and open so as to invite larger species with large travel distance needs to use it. Banff National Park in Canada has an overpass that contains vegetative cover for smaller species to feel protection. The presence of humans is a deterrent to wildlife, and thus this overpass in New Jersey buffers the edge with thick vegetation to eliminate the presence of humans. Here are a couple of proposed overpasses to be built like this one by Michael Van Valkenburg Associates to be built over I-70 in Colorado that utilize a keen knowledge of habitat continuation across the corridor. And now, here is a scaled figure ground plan of the wildlife overpass in Birkenau, Germany, to serve as a precedent for size and pattern. I created a scaled figure ground with Janet Rosenberg Studios' ARC competition finalist entry for the I-70 overpass that displays the vegetation and size of the overpass. Additionally, this spatial study was explored by a wildlife perspective series as they were to move through and experience the corridor designed by Janet Rosenberg Studio. After an understanding of innovative and precedent overpass corridors, I began my analysis of the proposed site of the overpass on Highway 17 in the Santa Cruz Mountains. You will notice that the site lies in a basin that naturally funnels wildlife into a desirable confluence of valleys that unite with a perennial stream and onto a permanent body of water, this being a valuable destination for thirsty wildlife among California's current drought. It was also important to consider potential natural vegetation of the area for the overpass, as well as contextual terrain, existing vegetation, roads, waterways, and land use. According to the Kugler natural potential vegetation of the overpass site area, chaparral was dominant, so I produced an ecological transect of the space approaching and cutting through the proposed overpass on Highway 17 to give insight into what these plants and their associations would be to inform successful overpass continued habitat for native wildlife. A scaled terrain model was created in Rhinoceros by means of contours derived in GIS from a USGS 1/3 arcsecond digital elevation model. Inspiration for the specific location and form of the overpass was drawn from the way Highway 17 cut right through the existing hill slope. I simply reinstituted this pre-existing form with the overpass for use for wildlife. The overpass and visitor center models were designed in Rhino to fit in with the landscape in form and function, and to look as if one and a part of the landscape, uniting architecture and landscape. The site of the visitor center would need to be able to have visibility over the entire overpass for great viewing. I ran a visibility function in ArcGIS on the DEM from 3 specific points representing both the ends and the center of the overpass. These points were tailored to the exact heights off the ground of the overpass and from the viewer of 5.5 feet tall. Where all 3-point visibilities overlapped gave indications of where a visitor center could be located. From here, aspect of preference to southern slopes was preferred that were between 10 and 20% and were not disrupting wholesome habitat. Of course, a series of ecological transects were created to clarify the vegetation of chaparral around the visitor center site. A series of renderings were created as an experiential progression from first sight of the visitor center as one drives up the road to the hilltop, then walking through the entry garden, and finally looking off the overlook balcony at the wildlife overpass.